There is a scene early in the E-Myth Revisited where a woman named Sarah sits across a table from Michael Gerber. She bakes pies. Her shop is called All About Pies, and she is crying. Not the cinematic kind of crying, the kind that comes after 7 years of 14-hour days, of weekend deliveries, of holidays spent alone in the kitchen because there is nobody else to do the work. Sarah went into business because she loved baking pies. Now she hates pies. She hates her customers. She hates her own shop. And she does not understand what has gone wrong. She thinks she has failed at business. Gerber tells her she has not failed at business. He tells her something stranger. He tells her she never actually started a business at all. This is the Founder's Bookshelf. 1 book a week, 1 sharp take, no fluff. If that sounds like your kind of channel, the subscribe button is your friend. Michael Gerber published the original E-Myth in 1986. He revised and expanded it as The E-Myth Revisited in 1995. The book has now sold more than 1 million copies and remains, 3 decades on, one of the most recommended books in small business circles. Founders pass it around. Consultants assign it. The phrase, "work on your business, not in it," has been borrowed so often that most people who use it cannot remember where they first heard it. Gerber came to business consulting from an unusual background, having spent his earlier years as a musician. He founded a firm called E-Myth Worldwide, and he spent decades coaching the same people he writes about, the contractors and bakers and bookkeepers and chiropractors who own roughly half the businesses in the United States. He saw the same pattern repeat thousands of times. A person good at a craft decides to start a business doing that craft. Within a few years, the business has eaten their life. Gerber wrote the E-Myth in the middle of an era when this was the dominant story in American business. The 1980s and 1990s were the high tide of franchising. McDonald's was not just a chain, it was a management theory. Ray Kroc was widely studied not as a fast food magnate, but as a designer of repeatable systems. The promise of franchising was that you could build a business once, document it once, and then replicate the result across thousands of locations operated by people you would never meet. Gerber looked at this and saw, correctly, that the deepest insight of the franchise revolution was not about hamburgers. It was about the relationship between a business owner and the work itself. This is what makes the E-Myth a different book than its reputation suggests. Most readers think it is a book about systems. It is not. It is a book about identity. It is a book about who you are when you start a business, and who you have to become for the business to survive. The systems are the visible part. The argument underneath them is psychological. And this is the point at which the book makes a promise it cannot quite keep. Because Gerber gets the diagnosis right with surgical precision, and then writes another 200 pages prescribing a cure that was already starting to date the year it shipped. The E-Myth Revisited is 2 books bound together. A diagnostic masterpiece followed by a prescription that was already showing its age the year it was published. The framework people remember from this book is the one Gerber introduces in the first chapter. Every small business owner, he argues, is actually 3 different people sharing one head. There is the entrepreneur, the visionary, the part of you that imagines what could be. There is the manager, the planner, the part of you that wants order and predictability. And there is the technician, the doer, the part of you that is good at the actual work and finds satisfaction in performing it. In most people, Gerber writes, the 3 are not equal. The entrepreneur is 10% of the personality, the manager is 20%, the technician is 70%, and it is the technician, by a wide margin, who decides to start the business. The pastry chef opens the bakery, the mechanic opens the garage, the therapist opens the practice. Each of them, Gerber says, is having what he calls an entrepreneurial seizure, a moment of conviction that goes something like this. If I am good at the work, and my boss is making money on my work, then I should be making money on my work, and I should start a business. This is the original sin of small business. The technician believes that being good at the work is the same thing as being good at the business of doing the work, and it is not. It is a different game, played by different rules, with a different opponent. Most summaries of the E-Myth stop here. They list the 3 personalities. They quote, "Work on your business, not in it." They conclude that the lesson is delegation. Build systems. Get yourself out of the day-to-day. Hire people. This is where the standard reading goes wrong, because what Gerber is describing is not a problem of delegation, it is a problem of seeing. The technician inside the founder cannot delegate the work effectively because the technician does not actually understand what the work is for. The technician sees the work as the point. The entrepreneur sees the work as a means to a different end. Until the founder learns to look at the business from outside, from the perspective of the entrepreneur, they cannot tell which parts of the work matter and which parts are merely habit. Working on the business, not in it, is not a productivity slogan. It is a perceptual shift. It is the difference between standing inside a building and standing across the street to look at how the building is shaped. The advice is not, do less of the work. The advice is, change which work you consider yours. And here is what most readers miss when they take the framework at face value. Gerber is not telling you to stop being the technician. He is telling you to notice that the technician is in charge, and that as long as the technician is in charge, the business will always be the size of one person doing the work. The manager and the entrepreneur are the parts of you that build the thing that scales beyond your hands. They are the muscles that have to be deliberately developed, because they are not the muscles that got you into the business in the first place. Here is where the book gets interesting, and here is where most readers stop reading carefully. Roughly 2/3 of the way through, in a chapter titled Your Primary Aim, Gerber asks the reader to do something that feels out of place in a business book. He asks them to write their own eulogy, not literally. He asks them to imagine their funeral, to imagine what they would want the people who loved them to say about how they spent their time. He asks them to describe the life they want to have lived, the kind of person they want to have been, the relationships, the experiences, the version of themselves they want to recognize when they look in the mirror at the end. And then he says something that, taken seriously, is the whole point of the book. He says that your primary aim, the answer to the question of what your life is for, comes before your business. The business is a means. The aim is the end. You design the business to serve the life, not the other way around. Most readers skim this chapter. They came for systems and frameworks and quantification charts. They did not come for a meditation on death. The chapter feels, to a certain kind of impatient reader, like a detour, and so they skip ahead to the parts about flowcharts and operating manuals. This is the most important misreading in the book, because everything Gerber writes about the franchise prototype, the documentation, the systems, the orchestration, only makes sense if you have first answered the question of what the business is for. The systems are not the destination. The systems are the mechanism by which the business stops eating the life it was supposed to fund. If you build the systems without first defining the life, you have not solved the entrepreneurial seizure. You have simply built a more efficient version of the same trap. Think about what this means for the operator who reads the book straight through. They start with the diagnosis. They recognize themselves in Sarah, the pie shop owner who works 14-hour days and resents her own customers. They learn about the 3 personalities. They nod along to work on the business, not in it. And then they get to the part about the primary aim, and they think, this is the soft chapter. This is where the consultant wanders off into self-help. Let me get back to the actionable parts. And then they spend the next 10 years building the systems Gerber recommends with one critical input missing. They have built systems to serve a life they never defined. So the systems do what systems do. They scale whatever they were pointed at. And what they were pointed at, by default, is more revenue, more headcount, more locations, more of whatever the business already produces. The business grows. The owner becomes wealthier. And in roughly the same way Sarah did at the pie shop, they wake up one morning unable to remember why they started. The primary aim chapter is the load-bearing chapter of the E-Myth Revisited. Everything else in the book is engineering. Engineering without a destination is just motion. And motion, dressed up in a Gerber-approved operations manual, is still the same trap the book is supposed to help you escape. There is a place in the E-Myth Revisited where the book starts to date itself, and it is the place where Gerber gets most enthusiastic. The franchise prototype. Gerber's central prescription is this: you should design your business as if you were going to franchise it. Even if you have no intention of selling franchises, you should pretend that your business will eventually be operated by a stranger in a different city working from a manual you wrote. Document everything, standardize everything, build the business as a turnkey operation, the McDonald's of dentistry, the McDonald's of accounting, the McDonald's of whatever you do. In 1995, this was a useful provocation. It was useful because it forced the technician operator to see the business from the outside, to see it as a designed object rather than a job they happened to be doing. And as a thought experiment, the franchise prototype still has value today. The problem is the second-order consequence. The franchise prototype assumes that the value in your business sits in its repeatability, that what makes the business valuable is the documented procedure, the standardized output, the predictable result. This assumption was already weakening when Gerber wrote the book, and in the 3 decades since, it has reversed for most of the businesses his readers actually run. Consider the modern operator landscape, the agency owner whose value lies in the founder's taste and relationships, the software company whose moat is judgment about which features matter, the boutique law firm where clients are paying for a specific partner's experience, the newsletter that succeeds because of one writer's voice, the consulting practice where the entire offering is the founder's pattern recognition. For these businesses, and they make up an enormous share of small business today, the franchise prototype is precisely the wrong model. Their value is not in being repeatable. Their value is in being not quite repeatable. The judgment cannot be documented. The taste cannot be standardized. The relationships cannot be operating manualed. This is not a small footnote. This is the central productive tension in Gerber's book that the book itself does not fully resolve. He assumes the goal is to build a business that runs without you. For some businesses, the McDonald's franchise prototype kind, this is correct. For others, the business is unrepeatable by design, and the question is not how to remove yourself, but how to leverage yourself. If Gerber were writing the book today, the franchise prototype chapter would probably look different. The honest update is not that systems do not matter, they do. The honest update is that the unit of leverage in modern small business is rarely the operations manual. It is more often the documented judgment, the codified taste, the trained team that has absorbed the founder's pattern recognition. The systems exist, they just live in heads and shared docs and Slack threads, not in 3-ring binders behind the counter. The diagnosis Gerber offers travels intact. The cure he prescribes was built for a different decade and a different kind of business. Which brings us back to where the book actually lives, underneath the franchise prototype and the operations manuals and the 3 personalities. The E-Myth Revisited is a book about identity. It is a book about who you are and who you become when you decide to own the business instead of doing the job. The systems framework, the franchise prototype, the quantification charts, all of these are downstream of a single decision that the book asks the reader to make, and that most readers never quite make. The decision is to stop being the technician. Not literally. The technician inside you does not actually die. The pastry chef who started the bakery still loves making pastry. The mechanic still loves fixing cars. The therapist still loves the work. Gerber is not asking you to give up the craft. He is asking you to demote it. The craft is no longer the point of the business. The craft is one input into the business, and the business is one input into the life, and the life is the point. This is what the primary aim chapter is doing. It is forcing the reader to install a new hierarchy of value. The life is at the top. The business serves the life. The work serves the business. The work is not the point. It is the lowest tier of the stack. For a technician, this is an almost unbearable inversion. The work is the thing they love. The work is the thing they are good at. The work is the reason they started in the first place. To demote the work from the top of the stack to the bottom is to demote, in some real sense, the version of themselves that started the business. That version has to die for the next version to begin. This is what Gerber gets right that most readers miss, and this is what almost no business book before or since has named with the same clarity. Most business books assume the founder is a fully formed entrepreneur who who needs better tactics. Gerber assumes the founder is a technician who needs to become something new. The book is a developmental text. Its real subject is who you have to become to run the business, not how to run the business. And once you read the book this way, the franchise prototype stops mattering very much. The franchise prototype is one possible expression of the identity shift, but it is not the identity shift itself. You can run an unrepeatable agency, a one-of-a-kind law firm, a singular consulting practice, and still go through the developmental arc Gerber is actually describing. The arc is from doing the work, to designing the system that designs the work, to designing the life the system is supposed to serve. You can travel that arc with or without franchising. What you cannot do is travel it while remaining the technician. This is why the E-Myth Revisited keeps selling 30 years after publication. Not because the franchise model holds up, it largely does not. The book sells because the diagnosis of the entrepreneurial seizure is one of the most precise pieces of psychological writing in the business canon, and because every new generation of operators recognizes themselves in Sarah at the pie shop. The book is right about something most readers never quite articulate, even after they have absorbed its lessons. It is right that the founder has to change before the business can.
So what does an operator do with this book, given the reading we have just done?
4 things, none of which are the conventional takeaways. The first is a diagnostic. Sit with the description of Sarah at the pie shop, and the entrepreneurial seizure, and the 3 personalities. Run an honest audit. Ask yourself which of the 3 is in charge of your week. Look at the calendar. Look at where the hours go. If the technician owns more than half the schedule, the diagnosis applies to you. This is not a soft exercise. It is the most important data you can collect about your own company, and it costs nothing. The second is to write your primary aim before you redesign anything else. Do this on paper, in your own handwriting if you can. Not a vision document for the company, a document about your life. What does the week look like in 5 years if the business is working? Who are you with? Where are you? What are you doing on a Tuesday morning? Most operators have never written this down, and the absence of the document is the reason their business optimization always seems to optimize toward more of the same. The third recommendation is to ignore the franchise prototype as Gerber describes it, and replace it with something more honest about your business. Ask which parts of your work are repeatable, and which parts are repeatable only by you. Build documentation for the first category. Build leverage for the second. Hires, training, codified judgment, apprenticeship inside the company. Most small businesses fail because they try to systemize the wrong half, the half that should remain in the founder's head, and they leave the actually repeatable half undocumented. The fourth is to read the book non-linearly. Skip the franchise prototype chapter on a reread. Start with the entrepreneurial seizure. Then go directly to the primary aim chapter. Then read the operational chapters with the question, does this serve the life I just described? Held steady in your mind. The book is structured as if the operational content is the destination. It is not. The primary aim is the destination, and everything else is engineering toward it. Treated this way, the E-Myth Revisited stops being a manual on small business operations. It becomes what it always was underneath. A book about who to become. If this is the kind of analysis you came here for, the subscribe button is the way to tell the algorithm you want more of it. Next week, we are taking a hard look at John Warrillow's Built to Sell, and at the 7 drivers that separate a business a stranger will actually buy from a job the founder has simply been doing for a very long time. The bookshelf is open. See you Tuesday.